It is my pleasure to introduce the next panel of speakers. These leaders will share their strategies, successes, lessons learned in their efforts to develop a Charleston that welcomes visitors when remaining true to their culture and history. Joining the session are Helen Hill, Chief Executive Officer of Charleston Area Convention Bureau, Harry Lesesne, Executive Director of Charleston Parks, and Chris Price, President and founding member of PrimeSouth Group, who spent his youth in Lexington, Kentucky. Mary Quinn Raymer, the President of VisitLEX, will facilitate this discussion. Marianne.
So we're a little tight up here, so I'm hiding behind Terry. I'm really excited to spend the next hour talking with these distinguished guests about destination development. And if you haven't thought about destination development and what it means, I hope that you'll spend this next hour thinking about what it could be for Lexington and what we can learn from Charleston. This is a great city to inspire what we're doing with respect to our destination in Lexington. So in order to get things started, I'm just going to ask our panelists to do a brief introduction of themselves, what they've been up to, and then we'll get started with questions. Chris?
Well, let me begin by saying welcome, Lexington, Kentucky, to Charleston, South Carolina, now my new home. I have to first apologize that they give me 10 minutes up here on open mic. It kind of reminds me of a karaoke night at Dudley's in Lexington. So anyway, do want to apologize up front if I offend anybody in the crowd. This is some of the topics that I'm going to discuss it's all about urban core development. Urban development, developing a city, a livable city. And I have a lot of friends still in Lexington on both sides of the aisle. And anyway, I apologize in advance if there's any hardships there. But it's very interesting, when I was asked to be on this panel, I was kind of challenged about living in Lexington, Kentucky, growing up there, coming to my new home of Charleston for 30 years, and really what is it all about? And it's all about building a city. It's all about building a livable city, which most of you all know is the work aspect, the social aspect, and the living aspect. Those are the three legs that you've got to have a livable city. The way I want to do this is spend just a couple of minutes with topics that I identified that make our cities a little different. A lot of the challenges are the same, but these are just thoughts, and I just want to run through them. And I encourage you guys to interact with the panel, interact with us. That's what you're here for, to learn. So again, my topic is urban infill, urban core city development. That's what I'm about. I'm not that smart to know much about anything else. So the branding aspect, I'm going to leave to these two characters. So some differences. Lexington, Kentucky. The core brand, horse farms and bourbon. Charleston, South Carolina. Beaches and historic fabric. Now that's recently been expanded to the culinary scene, into the entertainment and shopping districts, those scenes. So we've expanded our brand. So as developers, what we do is hopefully enhance that brand experience. We give tools to Helen to market the city. Lexington, Kentucky, spread out. It's a suburban city. Spoke system in your transportation, infrastructure. Charleston, South Carolina, compact, scarcity of land. 50% of our land is water. Lexington, Kentucky. Downtown arteries are thoroughfares. Charleston, South Carolina. Our streets are activated. They're part of the community. Upper King Street, which you all have seen a drastic difference in the last several years, Used to be it used to be a one-way street. Used to be a thoroughfare from A to B, and it was not a district. That changed in the early 90s. Lexington, Kentucky. There's not a main shopping entertainment district in Lexington in my mind. There are spots, zones, but you have an interconnectivity problem. Charleston, South Carolina. King Street has been the king for 250 years. I mean, it's where everybody, it's our gathering place. I know that there's a lot of development going on in Lexington on Jefferson, the beautiful Victorian Square place, and then Short Street. The problem that you got now is you got 3 distinct marketplaces. How do you connect them? Connectivity is very important because when people come to visit a city that's branded, they go to an area, but once there is a roadblock or a gap, they won't go to that next area. Zoning. Basically, what we have done in Charleston, South Carolina, it's probably the toughest zoning city in America. And I've heard this from developers from California, New York, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen some of the biggest and the best come into our city and push us little folks around. Well, they soon leave. But what we've done with our zoning is we limited our square footage, buildable square footage in this city. And when I say that, we can only build 55 feet, maybe 80 feet in some sectors, but that's it. What that has done, though, is given me a little bit of stability. I know that I'm not going to have massive square footage come online, so I got some barriers to entry. So I know there's barriers to entry from other people, other developers. But the problem with that now is limited square footage. I'm not going to touch this one right now except to say leadership. We've had a strong mayor for years. This mayor back in the 80s, public-private partnership, Charleston Place, and activated Lower King Street to allow us to have a bookend. In block by block, we've tackled that destination shopping and culinary scene block by block, and it has not been easy. The last of the wonderful ideas that I've identified about these cities is we have an unprecedented demand factor going on in this marketplace. And when I say unprecedented, it's unprecedented. Global industrial players like Boeing, Mercedes, Volvo, that's a demand factor that most cities don't have. Makes it a heck of a lot easier to fill the vacancies that developers build. So let me just say that as a developer, Charleston, South Carolina is a very difficult environment to build in, but it also creates a high barrier to entry that gives me some sort of safeguards that I can anticipate the future. Our job as developers are basically city builders. So what we do is enhance the bucket that Helen has to market to the marketplace. So basically all we do is further the tools that she has. In closing, I want to say this. We all have challenges, the cities have challenges, but we, Charleston, South Carolina, as successful as we have been as a brand and as a city, and a livable city, identified a couple of issues that we have that are probably more profound today than it was 3 years ago. Affordability, affordable housing issue. Affordability again, retail, office, residential housing stock. We have a major problem. We can't build the square footage, so hence our rent rates, retail, office, are through the roof. I literally did a lease 5 years ago at $35 a square foot. I released that space today at $65. That's tough. So what you're starting to see in this marketplace is King Street is not so much just a shopping destination, but what we're seeing is the retailers now come here, they got to have a presence. There's only a few streets in America that are marketing streets, and fortunately, Charleston, South Carolina is one of them. Traffic and parking, major problem. Is it a pedestrian city or a vehicular city? One interesting thing that's come about in the last several years, major big players coming to Charleston, South Carolina. I basically assembled 3 buildings last fall and competed against 3 developers, New York City, Connecticut, and California. The makeup of Charleston's changing. So that challenge now is the ownership now is big money. This is now becoming a city of preservation of capital as opposed to a return of capital. You don't hear that often. And the last thing that is very interesting that's going on right now is we have been so successful, and especially Helen's group, in branding us and bringing the tourism industry to its heights. The problem we got now, and the battle we have now, is there too much tourism, hospitality, infrastructure, quote unquote, hotels, coming into Charleston, South Carolina and pushing out office, retail, and residential. So our successes now, is it taking away from a true livable city? I don't know, that debate's happening now. The city had panels on it 2 weeks ago. So some very interesting challenges that success breeds. So a couple of thoughts, and hopefully I did not offend anybody with some of your all's challenges. We all have them, but we're all here to build better cities. So, thank you.
Thank you. Helen? Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are so happy that you're in Charleston. And I think we were really brave to put Firefly on y'all's tables. I really did. That was very brave on our part. But I feel really, really honored to get to spend a few minutes with you today. I had the opportunity to be introduced to Lexington by my good friend Bob Stewart and your wonderful former Lieutenant Governor and Auditor, Crit Llewellyn, and her wonderful husband, Lynn. And I tell you what, when you can go to her house on your first visit to Lexington, you have arrived. But, you know, while we're up here, and I feel like we're like in a little counseling session, this is probably a really good time to make this admission, but there was really something special happened to me in Lexington, and I fell in love there. And it was an unfortunate time to fall in love because I was a newlywed. And I'm telling you, you know, when you have that feeling like your heart's beating really fast, and he had these beautiful brown eyes and red hair, and it was curly, and he was tall, about 16 hands, and he lived at the Kentucky Horse Park. And I'm telling you, that Basher Curly, I wanted him to come home with me. And I did. I had that moment that you want every visitor to have, which is I connected with what makes you special. And I love that horse to this day. I was so sad when he moved on from the horse park. But it's that kind of experience that you want every visitor to have in the connection that you have. I've been doing this, as Mary knows, a really long time. The Convention and Visitors Bureau was my first job after I graduated from college. So embarrassingly enough, I'm coming up on my 30th year. So I've been doing it a long time, and I grew up in Charleston, so I have sort of a long view. And I'll tell you that some of the things that we've done well, and some of the things that we sure could have done better. I think the first thing that we did well is we've really marketed well as a community. One of the most unusual convention bureaus you'll ever meet. We have 9 funding governments. 9. 8 mayors, 1 county council chairman, 9 councils. And we have a lot of private sector. We have about 50% publicly funded, 50% privately funding. So we've got a lot of people in our world that kind of have the longer view, and that's been a good thing. The interesting thing about having 9 governments is convincing those people who have a different name, like Kiowa Island or Isle of Palms or Mount Pleasant or North Charleston, that they want to be under the brand of Charleston. Because, you know, every elected leader, there's many of you out there, everybody's proud of their city, right? But what makes us special, right, is Charleston. And every year we probably spend an inordinate amount of money on research, but we know why people are coming. And it's the sense of place you heard Mayor Tecklenburg talk about, you heard Chris talk about. It's that authentic place that you can't do it. And it's interesting, if you look back at our history, we had to be really brave. And Harry will tell you, he used to work for Mayor Rowley. It's really hard to say no to some stuff when you need stuff so bad. But we decided a long time ago that we were just going to be who we really were. And you know, y'all know, not all of our history is pretty. I mean, not just what happened last summer, but just all of our history in Charleston's not pretty. But it's our history, and we own it. And it's interesting that that was a brave step, and we had a lot of great elected officials that were willing to stand behind that brave step. And now we've got a lot of brave municipal leaders in our sea islands that are like, hey, I just want them to eat, sleep, and drink at my island, you know. You can sell however you want, just get them here. And really, that's an unusual thing, and it's a fragile coalition. I tell everybody it's like walking around with a basket of eggs. You never know when one of them's going to want to fall out. But it's worked for us so far. The other thing that I think that we've done really well is back in 2008, we were looking at where our visitors were coming from. And, you know, we had a lot of nice people coming from Charlotte, a lot of people from Raleigh. It's people who drive in from Atlanta. But we knew that because of our challenging air service situation, that it was really expensive to fly in and out of Charleston, and we didn't have really great service. And we said, if we don't get involved in the air service business, we are destined to be only a drive destination. And we really wanted to be more than that. That's when we formed a group with our airport. I know y'all have got a beautiful airport. Did y'all see, speaking of which, our new and improved airport? Which concourse did y'all came in?
I don't even know.
OB. So it looks pretty good, right? We're not finished yet, but it's coming. But we got together, so it was economic development, us, Chamber of Commerce, and we said, we're going to figure it out. And the first thing we did is wrote the big check for the company to do the research about what we could actually get. And I always laugh. The airport director's here somewhere, aren't you? Here somewhere? I saw some. Oh, yeah. You know this. We always laugh that you know, everybody wants to meet in the boardroom at the airlines, you know, but those are not the people that are making the decisions. It's some kid who's 26 who graduated from MIT who's in scheduling. And, you know, they know your numbers better than you do. And it's interesting that we made that decision then. Well, during that time, we had an airline called AirTran, and they had come to us. They flew 2 measly flights to Atlanta, which, you know, Delta was just going to squash them. And we loved them. It was great to have a low-cost carrier in our market, but they really wanted us to pony up and to help them and basically give them a subsidy. And back to being willing to make a tough decision, we said, you know what? We got Southwest on the hook, and you know, we're not engaged yet, but we're pretty damn close. And it was that bird in the hand and the one in the bush, and it's so hard to let that one go, right? Well, we did it. And for about 6 months, I think half of the community hated me. But 6 months later, Southwest made the announcement that they were coming into South Carolina, and they were doing something unprecedented. They were opening 2 cities in the same week. They brought 700,000 airline seats to Charleston, South Carolina, and Greenville, South Carolina, either ends of the state. And it opened up new markets for us that we didn't have. It gave us those 7 flights a day, created magic from the beginning. But it didn't last, right? Because what happens? Everybody goes and gets on American or Delta because they're a medallion flyer. And so we decided that it's not going to work unless we market it really hard. So that year, we successfully went into all those markets. So all of a sudden, we have a presence in Chicago, and we have a presence in Washington, we have a presence in Nashville, we have a presence in Houston. And it worked. We invited people to come to Charleston because it was easy and fast to get here. And that led to the success of having JetBlue. JetBlue, probably one of the most amazing corporate partners you could have, and I really think a big part of why Volvo decided to come to Charleston. But we've totally changed where our visitors come from based on the access. So if you looked at my visitor profile study in 2010, you would see North Carolina cities as the number 1, 2, and 3. Today, it's New York, it's Washington, and Boston. Is that amazing? And it's all based on access. People have less time, and they want to go to somewhere different. And that's how we did it. So the thing that I really wish we could change, and Chris has already touched on it, is that we didn't do a good enough job helping people understand the complexity of tourism marketing as it relates to what the product is all about. Harry and I were just talking about one of our competitors in the next state down, who's also a historic city, and they're having some challenges with keeping their room rate up high enough. And it's really because they've had the wrong product mix in their market. So I guess that's my needs improvement. But we are so honored that you're here, and I really look forward to visiting with you.
Thank you. Harry?
Thank you. I have the great honor of following my good friend Helen here. And I apologize in advance. I'm recovering from a little bit of a summer cold. Thank you for having us. We're flattered that you're here. This is such we were just talking about a huge chamber group. This is probably the biggest chamber group we've ever seen come through Charleston, and we're so happy that you're here.
So impressive.
It is very impressive, and it's a great honor that you visited our city and wanted to hear from us. I bring greetings from my wife, Kendra Stewart, who taught at EKU for a number of years, just down the road, who moved to Charleston and loves it here, but has fond memories of her time in Richmond. As Luther mentioned, I work with the parks of Charleston, public spaces here. My organization is called the Charleston Parks Conservancy. Chris mentioned the public-private partnership at Charleston Place, which is really one of the catalysts that really turned the tide in Charleston from heading down the road of urban decay towards urban regrowth and revitalization. I like to think of my organization, the Charleston Parks Conservancy, which is now about 9 years old, as a public-private partnership. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that works in partnership with the city to improve the public spaces of our city and engage the public in caring for and being involved in and taking pride in public space. And our belief is that it creates a stronger community when people are invested, not just in their own private development or their own privately owned home, but take pride in the city's shared public spaces. So we were founded about 9 years ago, and with the support of the city and with the support of a lot of people, including our founder, Darla Moore, who endowed the organization early on. We've been able to improve public spaces in our city all over the place. I hope you get a chance on your tour to go see Colonial Lake, which we just cut the ribbon on Saturday. A complete overhaul of that park, creating new gardens around a historic park its roots go back to the 1760s. Prior to my time at the Charleston Parks Conservancy, I've been with the Conservancy now for about 3.5 years. I worked, as Helen said, in the mayor's office, in Mayor Joe Riley's office. That was an incredible experience. Joe Riley was mayor of the city for 40 years. He was elected when he was 32 years old in 1975 and led the city until January. And has really sort of helped to oversee the transformation of Charleston that you see today. And there really is a lot of things to study about what he was able to do in Charleston, what the role of the municipal government vis-a-vis the private sector, how the two can work together. Chris mentioned the zoning regulations that we have. And really, all of those very stringent zoning regulations, architectural standards, and so forth are about preservation of a couple of things. The first is, one of the things that makes Charleston special is, as Chris mentioned, there's scarcity and density here because of our peninsular city. But Charleston is a human-scaled city. We don't have tall skyscrapers. The ones that we do have, most people consider to be mistakes. And it's a walkable pedestrian city. And that's why the public spaces are so important. And Rebecca mentioned, and Helen can talk greatly about the brand. And Mayor Riley used to always talk about the brand of Charleston is high quality. The way he would speak about the 50-year test. He would say, is what we're doing here today, we've all heard this in Charleston, is what we're doing here today, will people in 50 years say we made the right decision? So that was always the way we were to measure whether or not what we were doing was the right thing or not, was in 50 years, will this produce an outcome that people are thankful for, or will they be saying, those people really screwed up and we got to fix that? So we've got a human scale city, and as both Helen and Chris have mentioned, part of the brand of Charleston is that we are a real city. Right behind you is a working port in the heart of our city. It's one of the busiest ports on the East Coast. Tens of thousands of BMWs and soon to be Volvos and Mercedeses will come be shipped out of that port to places all around the world. We've got Boeing, which you saw this morning, and a host of other new things and older things that are being newly successful here. But what makes Charleston great, and the reason why people want to visit, and a lot of the people that we welcome here as new visitors or new residents came here first as visitors and said, this is a city that I would like to live in. And the reason why they want to live here is because it's a real place. It's not contrived. It's not Disneyland, or it's the real thing. And if I could say anything to any city that's looking to try to revitalize itself, it's identify those things that make you genuine and make you real, and then capitalize on those. We're lucky that we had an urban core here that was preserved. One of the things that Mayor Riley did was really invest in high quality public space. You'll see the waterfront park. I mentioned Colonial Lake, Marion Square, which is the central square in the city, right in the middle of the central business district, along the big, most prominent corner in the city, Calhoun and King Streets. Back in the 1990s, a major renovation of that space really beckoned the growth from south of Calhoun Street, where it had mostly been in the 1990s, to take the leap over Calhoun Street and move north, which is where most of Chris's businesses have been. Business is on the northern end of King Street. So my life's work is about public space and creating high quality public space that people care and are invested in and take pride in. And that's a lesson that I think any city can learn from. So with that, I'll turn it back over to y'all for questions.
Thank you. Thanks so much for sharing some initial insights. So I'll get started with a couple of questions. And I'd love to hear from you all in the audience if there's specific questions that you have. So we'll save some time for that at the end. When I say the term destination development, I'm curious what pops into your mind. And then secondly, as a follow-up to that, Charleston is obviously, you have 200 plus fans in the room of Charleston. As Bob said earlier, this trip sold out very quickly. So what has been Charleston's secret sauce? How have you all done destination development? Has it been a collaborative effort? Has it been a one-off? Do you all hold routine meetings with each other? How do your partners come together and make this place so special?
I might let you do that.
Okay. I think the most important thing that happened for us is we had this big windstorm back in 1989 called Hugo. And it was the year that I was made the CEO of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, so it kind of sticks in my head. But it was interesting that this is before we had everybody's looking at your phone now. I mean, it was before we had that, right? I mean, we didn't have that kind of technology. So when the hurricane swept through Charleston, we found out we had some things happen. Like in my office, I've got one of the papers from London, the Telegraph, and it says, Charleston, South Carolina, gone with the wind. And, we found out that there was all these things being said, and Charleston was beat up, right? We were really battered and bruised, but, we weren't down. We still had a thriving, and it wasn't as bad as it was being portrayed. And I think that is the time that we found out that from a destination development point of view, we could sell to the press just like you sell to any meeting planner. Now today, media and public relations is all the rage, right? But back then it wasn't. And we got started one by one, going to every single writer that wrote a story about Charleston and said, hey, things are going really good. You want to come on down? We'd love to host you. And, we laugh sometimes in our world, Mary's and mine, that people think that media relations thing just happens by magic. But it doesn't. It's a lot of hard work. One of the things that we did is we started with talking about the things we knew we were good at. So you didn't just want to talk to the travel press, we started talking to all of them. So we talked to the garden press, and we talked to the food press. And, we've gotten this really cool reputation as a foodie destination. And also, anybody who grew up here will tell you, we're kind of eating the same thing we've been eating our whole life. We're just talking about it a lot differently. And it's true, because we're very fortunate. We've got amazing agriculture here, right? We have amazing things. And we got a lot of seafood. But it's changed the way we talk about it. And you'll hear more about that. And I think that one of the things that we talk about destination development is really looking at what do we have to sell that somebody is interested in today. Like, we've ridden this food craze really well. We've done really well with destination weddings. And as my former chairman says, whether it's your first, second, or third marriage, Charleston is the place, right? And even if we don't get them for the marriage, we can get them for the honeymoon. So, but the thing that we see on the horizon, and this is really an opportunity for you all, is really that arts and culture. And I'm not talking about just walking around a museum. I'm talking about the authentic sense of place as it relates to culture. And ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you, after having the blessing to get to be at your place, y'all got it in spades. You really do. And I think that that's what the next wave of travelers is going to be looking for. So I think y'all got a great opportunity.
I'd like to add one topic to that too. Is Helen's exactly accurate on the hurricane and how we packaged ourselves after that. But one additional thing I want to add to this is that a couple of years later, we lost a major employer, the Navy base. And this city, for years and years and years, was a Navy town, and it was closed. Our doors were closed. Hugo hit, Navy base hits, we lose 25,000 people. So we had to repackage ourselves and start opening these doors to say, hey, we're open for business. And that happened, and obviously the flood started. So I think that was a major, major influencing impact on Charleston in the early 90s. But prior to that, we were not open so much so to new business. Would you all agree and have any comment on that?
Sure, yeah. Just a quick anecdote about the storm. Mayor Riley was very aggressive about marketing the city and making sure everybody knew that Charleston was open for business. And they literally had T-shirts that every time he appeared on television, and every time city employees were out in the community and there was an opportunity to talk about Charleston, the shirt said, "Charleston, we're going strong." And so it was just continually beating that drum over and over that we're open for business. And as Chris mentioned, the Navy base closure was kind of a double whammy right on top of Hugo. And the city really, I mean, in many ways, both of these things kind of launched us into the next phase. The Navy base closure made us reevaluate what kind of city is it that we want to be? What kind of businesses, what kind of jobs do we want to attract here? And now if you go up to the Navy base, we were able to retain not the shipbuilding jobs, but many of the high-tech defense activities are at the old Charleston Navy base. So The defense contractors that are doing software for the Department of Defense, many of them are right here in Charleston. So,
well, and I think you also add into that, you got the opportunity after something like that happens, is it forces people to come together, right? I mean, y'all are here together to be together. And, you know, when you have two crises back to back, you just don't have a lot of choice. So I think that's something that was the blessing in disguise for our community, is that we didn't have a choice, and but it worked.
So who are your partners in both the public and private space, and how do you all work together?
well, I can jump in since a lot of what we do is partnership. And, you know, Charleston, I guess it feels like a bigger city than it really is. I know both Chris and Helen quite well. Actually, Helen's sister works with us at the Charleston Parks Conservancy. I know Rebecca and her husband, Chris, who are great supporters of our organization and have a church in the center of our city. So it's a small town, and a lot of it is relationships that are built over time, and it's great.
You're living that
yeah,
now.
I was going to say that you're doing that right now in a trip like this. It's not magic. Partnerships are just about relationships and finding common interests, and then bringing people together and convening people to find solutions. I don't know if
I'll agree with that. Yep.
Yeah.
So, Chris, this might be aimed a little bit more toward you. In terms of urban development, specifically urban retail development, how did you go about accomplishing what has happened, specifically using King Street as an example? Did you do it mom and pop, one shop at a time? Was there a grand vision that you used in developing? Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, I can tell you that we've been extremely fortunate here in Charleston that there's been a quite a large demand factor to get into this city. And so our issue's really been the supply factor. Back in the 80s, the Charleston Place was established and placed, and this is right when I moved to Charleston, but car dealerships, and I think there was a golf gas station on the corner of Market and King Street, but
It was a scary place. It was the kind of place that, like, my mom and daddy would let you ride your bike that way. I mean, it was scary.
in fact, Garden and Gun Club, the old one, was established in that area too. So many.
We missed that, but it was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be fun.
But they're really, it was an area of, I guess, captains' bars and I hate to say brothels, but I know of, not personally, of brothels that I've heard. But it was a scary place to be. And what's happened on our retail sectors, Charleston Place established a bookend Lower King Street. And block by block, that retail, I'd say, is it a resurgence or tackling? I remember our retail sectors really started in the early 2000s, and I really didn't, Charleston Place was always active, that block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks. But block by block, I remember we did Williams and Sonoma, and we were like, how in the world are we going to get this national retailer to cross Wentworth Street? I remember that. And then a couple years later, we did Pottery Barn. How are we going to get Pottery Barn to move up the street? And then in 2004, we did Urban Outfitters, and that was the next block. So literally, it was a block by block tackling job that we did. And really, the difficulty now, there is none. The problem we got now is we don't have the space. This assemblage we did last year on Lower King Street, I closed on a Friday, and within 10 days, I had 5 full price offers on the retail location, 3,000 square feet. I mean, that's amazing. So really, we have a supply issue right now. But years ago, it was a block by block tackling and filling in those gaps, because I tell you, the tourists, the visitors, they shop, and then when they come to a gap, I'm telling you, they turn around. So one of our big gaps that we've had was Marion Square. Well, we redid Marion Square and gave a reason for people to go to that place. What's happening now is Upper King Street. There's been a lot of infrastructure that's been placed on Upper King. We changed the drive-to destination A to B infrastructure to two-way, slowed it down. Now Upper King Street is kind of the driver of Charleston per se. And I think the future in the response of what Upper King Street has done for Charleston is yet to be seen. But I can tell you that the culinary scene that's been established here, keep in mind, it's kind of like Jefferson Street in your all's community. The creative class always goes to the cheap real estate. And that's what's happening on Jefferson Street. That's what happened to Upper King Street. Keep in mind that these restaurants, the creative guys, the creative chefs, they all, this started 2002, 2005, and it really took off in probably 2007, 2008. We did 5 restaurants, literally 5 restaurants within 3 years, and 4 of the 5 had James Beard something behind their name. That's incredible. You don't find that in cities. So I think the result of this new district that we've created up here, and it is a separate district, the culinary district that we have, it's yet to be seen the impact on Charleston, South Carolina. So, would we be #1 in the world Condé Nast if it wasn't for this district to be created in this culinary scene, all these chefs, et cetera, to have located there? I don't know. I don't have the answer yet. But what's interesting now is to see, we keep talking about this retail shift block by block by block. Just for the first time did we get a national retailer to cross over Calhoun Street and bridge that gap, i.e. we have West Elm. First time, #1. So, that retail creep continues, but the goal in the challenge there is not to have those gaps and keep that tourist flow back and forth. And there's a ton of activity going on right now on Upper King. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Question. Yes, ma'am. Is this going to be tough? Wait a minute. First of all, is this directed to me or to Helen or to Harry?
We have Manchester, Jefferson, Short, Victoria Square, National Avenue. None of them are tied together. They're all doing their own thing. I'm worried about people turning around. I'm also wondering, with the public spaces, the green space, how are you carving that out when you have land as a client issue?
Say that one more time.
Private space.
Okay. Let me. I'll turn to
please,
Chris
go ahead.
very quickly. One of the things that Charleston has done well is plan. So there was never one of these initiatives, whether it was Charleston Place or Marion Square or developing King Street, was all done pursuant to a plan that had an end goal, long-term goal. So if your individual blocks or individual areas of the city aren't working together and creating linkages that are harmonious, then you're not doing it right.
And one thing on that too is keep in mind that our shopping district, we really didn't have a lot of gaps per se. We don't have a lot of public spaces along that main shopping district corridor, because it's literally facade after facade after facade, which keeps that flow rolling north or south. So we're very fortunate with that. Very fortunate.
Well, the other thing is don't be, from a marketing and branding perspective, King Street is just one of the shopping areas that I sell, right? I mean, I've got that beautiful Tanger outlet mall that y'all saw on the way in. We have a beautiful town center in Mount Pleasant. I mean, Kiowa's got, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how you talk about it. They all have to be willing to be on the same team, because, Mary's budget's never going to be enough for them all to market individually. But if they can talk about those products. The other thing that I think Chris and Harry, when he's at the city, has done such a great job is I always say that when my visitor steps out onto King Street, right? They're walking out of the door. I want them to look down the street and see something they know, so they feel safe. So like if you're a girl, you see Talbot's, you'll see one of a national retailer, but you also want them to see something that they've never seen before, to pique their curiosity. So when you look down the street, you see something that is only in Charleston. And it's the mix of those two that make it special. And I think that's the magic for us, is that it's both. You got to have the local flavor with the national retailer. Those two together is the key.
And there's always going to be tension between those two. And that's why you have to everybody's got to be working together to make sure that you don't tip one side or the other.
Did you get your question answered per se, or? Yeah.
Think about those gaps we have in our community, and I love the idea of this culinary district because who doesn't like food?
Everybody loves food.
And I think one of the nice things that Charleston has done is some of the hottest, trendiest new restaurants are not on King Street anymore.
Right.
They're tucked away in neighborhoods and little corner stores that have been revitalized by these really talented chefs.
But back to what's going on is that people are talking about the food because it's something different than they can get at home. And y'all have that. I mean, what is it that's different? And that's how we end up talking about it.
It's interesting, too, that the culinary scene, Harry, you are correct, that a lot of the culinary experiences are, they've passed Upper King Street, and they are in these little pockets now. One thing that I have been seeing recently is the caliber of culinary experience is phenomenal. There are two new restaurants, do not want to name them yet, but the chefs are from New York City at some of the finest dining establishments ever. And they have packed up and have moved to Charleston, South Carolina. One's a team, and the other is an individual that came from the village. And they have put roots into this city. And I had the opportunity to have dinner there the other night, and I am shocked that it's a next culinary experience that we have not experienced here in Charleston yet. The demand it's very interesting and exciting to see and watch.
Well, we're wrapping up filming actually tomorrow for Top Chef season 14. I don't know if any of y'all watched that famous show Top Chef. I will honestly say that I didn't know exactly what it was, but who knew how many people really loved this show. But it was interesting what they had to say about our product, playing off of what he said. It really was interesting, the things and it all went back to our history. It was a lot about the rice culture and about sustainable seafood and about agriculture. It was fun. It's been fun to hear somebody else talk about your product.
Do other folks have questions? I have a couple more, but I want to make sure that people feel, in the back. I got a couple. Uh-oh, Chris.
Oh, boy. This is going to be sensitive
Chris,
right here.
talk a little bit about losing Johnson & Wales and what that did to the community and how the restaurants remained the way they were even with that loss.
I'm going to let Helen take care of that one.
Well, I'll tell you, we know they were stolen by Charlotte. Thank you, Bank of America. Is there any Bank of America people here? No, I'm just kidding.
Just for clarification.
Everybody knows what Johnson & Wales is, right?
Yeah.
Culinary school.
Yeah, and they did some great training here. We're really fortunate. Yeah, right here, exactly, right here. We were really fortunate that after that, because we had some great leadership with Mayor Joseph P. Riley, that we got real busy on getting a replacement. And Rick Giroux, who was here with the mayor earlier, we got the Art Institute of Charleston to come in, and Trident Technical School. We've got one of the strongest, and y'all get to meet the tech people. Make sure you ask them about culinary. Came in and got funding from the state to build a beautiful culinary training center that's in North Charleston. And I'll tell you, it hasn't completely solved the line kind of experience for our restaurants. But it certainly filled the hole. We had some restaurateurs who didn't always love Johnson & Wales because they said everybody who graduated thought they were going to come out and be Emerald, So they didn't always get the support staff that they needed. And Trident Tech is certainly doing that. The challenge we have now is that Trident Tech, every graduate they have, they got 2 or 3 job opportunities waiting for them. And if you are, no matter how great of a chef you are, a great restaurant you are downtown, if Publix Bakery is going to pay you more and give you benefits and vacation, maybe that James Beard Award chef does not look quite as cool. So it's an interesting challenge.
One more question. I got one right up here and one in the back.
I've heard you talk about downtown housing. Things going on there, because obviously I've heard you say space is becoming more expensive.
Housing is he asked about downtown housing. Two facets to that. There's affordable housing, and there's housing stock per se, market housing, and it's a challenge. That's being talked about now. There's a discussion going on in the city that how can we incentivize developers to increase that housing stock. So, right now, it's all about zoning and parking and all that good stuff, but how do we get additional units staying downtown? And maybe we should eliminate these zoning requirements of how many spaces per unit, and et cetera, and say allow the private sector to determine how many parking spaces you truly need on site, and let's pack that development site full as many units as you can. So there's conversations that are going on right now with the city, because we do have a major problem. There's a tract of land that is under contract, and it's almost an acre, close to $11 million for an acre of land that is up by the crosstown that still has all the height limitations that we discussed prior. So the housing stock is a major problem, and we, unfortunately, with our zoning, have eliminated, we've caused the problem, is what we've done. So to answer your question is, we don't have a solution yet. Yeah.
Ron, go ahead.
Just a quick one. I see where in your program where the Convention and Visitors Bureau offers programs to teach others in the hospitality industry how to sell the city, how to sell rooms, etc. Do you have any comparable programs for volunteers, such as an ambassador program to sell the city, just where ordinary citizens, so to speak, might be interested in helping promote the city?
We're really fortunate that we've had a lot of people move to Charleston. And sometimes I think the very best ambassadors are the people that haven't been here a really long time. And because of the amount of nonprofit excitement that we have, we end up training a lot of people. Like the Historic Charleston Foundation does these amazing house tours all during the spring. And so often their ambassadors are the ones that are fairly new. It might be a nice couple who's retired to Kiowa, or somebody who's moved here, an engineer with Boeing, and we end up training their volunteers in terms of what's available in the community. But as it relates to training our own staff, one of the questions that all of us get is, how in the world did Charleston, South Carolina get #1 in the world? Really? For Condé Nast Traveler? Really? And it's interesting when you dig down into the numbers, that they rate you in 5 areas. And it's the things that you'd expect, like hotels and restaurants, attractions, the ambiance in a place. But the way we win, and the way we have won in the past, is what they call friendliness or competent service. And it's really somebody who's in the industry who is empowered to say yes and take care of your issue. So that's really the reason we spend so much time on training volunteers and training our own hospitality workforce.
Go ahead, Herb.
Thank you. Is it on?
Yeah.
I'm interested in the sources of capital that are driving the tourism development in Charleston. Is it predominantly private money that's being invested? Is it in tandem with local taxes, and is it property sales, tourism taxes? Is it grant foundation money? How does that mix, and how do they work together?
Are you talking about tourism-driven projects? Are you talking about private investment per se,
the public space, the investment in attracting business?
Well, I can tell you from the private sector that most of the transactions occurring in Charleston, again, keep in mind, these are buildings, these are smaller projects. and not one large $75 million project. There's a couple of those that are under construction, obviously, but most of the transactions are smaller, $10, $15 million deals, and a lot of these, they're cash deals, cash. So again, I think I mentioned that earlier, that this marketplace, Charleston, South Carolina, King Street, has become a place to park capital. And they are not concerned about return on capital. There's a transaction that occurred recently with probably our last largest building on King Street. It was a $24 million transaction, cash deal. It was Northeast money, hedge fund money, and they don't have a plan. But it's safe. So again, preservation as opposed to return on capital. And you're seeing a lot of that happening now. It's really phenomenal. But again, it's a street that is safe, and economic downturns are going to happen. But if we lose downtown King Street, we have a lot bigger problems to face. So from the private sector side, that is happening. But let me add to that too, that there's a lot of private equity, big money trying to get into this city. And the problem that they've had is the deal sizes, the capital outflow that they have to put to work just doesn't work. Very few projects like that in Charleston, South Carolina. So the private equity side's having trouble allocating those monies. But you want to talk about
I can talk a little bit about the public side and the big public infrastructure projects that have hit Charleston. A combination of a couple of things. Charleston Place was funded by what was known as the UDAG program back in the late 70s, early 80s. So that essentially a very cheap loan from the federal government allowed the developers of Charleston Place to create that. And that hopefully will be paid off soon, and that money recycled back into the community. And there have been a couple of other essentially business improvement districts allowed temporary business improvement district allowed the King Street streetscape to be revitalized back in 15 or so years ago. But the biggest source of funding has been tax increment financing, and all of that has sort of really benefited from this investment that Chris is talking about, because the city is getting these huge increments from when the baselines were established back anywhere from the early 90s. But things like the waterfront park was a TIF. The aquarium was, I guess, part of that was TIF. The new Gilliard Center, our performing arts center, was funded largely on the public side. That's a public-private partnership, but the public side of that was TIF. So TIF financing has been the big driver of public infrastructure and public investment.
Alan, are you ready for that bourbon?
Yeah, he is.
Thank you guys, Helen, Chris, and Harry. Thank you.